So let it be written. So let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors. Do you want to ask us any question you want? If so, you can join our Patreon in the link below. And as a terror speaker, we will answer those questions in a long form format similar to this. This is actually a question from a terror speaker. Jeff, what is the question?
So this question is from one of our patrons, Thrain, and they ask, so they say, about 4 years ago, I was watching a game prep video from Tim, this Tim, actually, the very same, and he said something that irrevocably shaped my game design. I like to write checks that my brain has to cache. This uninhibited style of creative design has allowed me to do some incredible on-the-fly things in my games, but I'm also finding I wind up in more trouble than it's worth. So in a sense, my question is, how do I write creative checks that won't bounce? So this is actually something, Tim, that you have said, so I think we'll leave it to you to sort of explain the bit of backstory behind this and start us off.
Yeah. So when I said that, I'm imagining around the time it was like 4 years ago, and I was bouncing a lot of checks. So I can tell you what I'm about to tell you from making mistakes. And the first thing is I was doing it too often. So that would be my first piece of advice, is you can do it occasionally, but by only doing it occasionally, it's anchored in other things that you have a general idea for. So it's the wild card among sort of the established stuff, so that it just is a cool bit of mystery. What you don't want is to end up like the series Lost, in my opinion, where they did this so much that there was no way ever that it could ever all tie together. So that would be the first thing. How often is that? I would say when you have one kind of out there, don't do it again until you start to get a sense of what that one is. Maybe two if you really want to mix it up or, get bold. But from there, just chill out and kind of let the other ones come into focus. The other one is, it's really hard to have that check bounce if you tie it to something that's important to one of your players. So you have to be careful that it's not the wrong kind of important, where you, without their, permission, do something that's kind of like changes their backstory or influences something that they've said. But if you know that they're reaching to try to achieve a goal, if you somehow tie this, whether it's an obstacle to that goal or something that helps them gain that goal or a secret is revealed about that goal, that can be a really cool thing. So if this check you throw out there is this crazy NPC, and then you find out that this is actually related to the character, they will probably take it and run with it and have ideas that you never would have had. And then the final thing is, I was making mine too complex. So it's okay if they're simple, because they're going to land. People are going to understand you, and they'll go, oh, that was cool. You can make them surprising, but stay away from complexity. I was trying to weave these intricate, like layered things, and the truth is, it's hard to keep track of that. When I'm watching a TV show, I need a previously on. So when you have these 4-hour sessions, I'm not going to remember the tiny thing that you said 3 sessions ago when we're playing once a month. So it's okay if it's like, oh, wow, that was surprising, but I kind of see it. So those are my tips.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very good starting point. And I have a couple other points of advice that I give as well for this. The big one for me that I've sort of had to learn the hard way in a couple cases is to watch the timing of when you're writing checks versus when you need to cache them. So for example, if you're running a game that's, even just once a week, put the big check moment. If you're going to write one in the session, put it towards the end of the session, so you have the week to sort of let it sit in your brain exactly where that's going. So that when you get into the game next time, you sort of already have at least a general idea of what you can use, what you said, and how you'll be able to fit it all in and everything like that. Because I've definitely had a couple times where early on in the session, I'll toss out some big seed for something, and then during the session, I'll have to figure out exactly what that thing is because the players will like immediately get routed into that. And then suddenly it's like, now I've put out this huge big cliffhanger of what's going to happen in the world and all this big event that the prophecy has been alluding to or whatever, and suddenly instead of having a bunch of time to sit out and work out what would be cool, I have to think of something right then in that very moment, and I have nowhere to go other than forward. So that's advice number one, is just the more time you can give yourself to like think and process when you're going to put out these big hooks, the better it's going to be. And the easier it'll be to mesh it in because then you'll have a lot more time to think, or even just to let it sort of sit in your brain a little bit more. That like always helps me a lot when it comes to that sort of thing. Is like, I'm not even going to do a bunch of prep to work this thing out. I'm just going to let it sort of simmer on the back burner until next session. And just that might be enough even then to like get a more solid idea. And then the other thing that I would say is if you're going to write a check, have a good idea of what you want to buy already going into the session. So for example, you can use something like what Tim said of like, I want to drop a big moment about one of the players' backstories. Okay, whose backstories do I have here? What would be cool? Or I really want to work out, this faction in my world. Like I haven't really used them yet, and I want to find a way to use them. Maybe I can drop a little seed that'll lead them towards that. And if you sort of have a little list already, even if it's just a mental list of like, here's 4 or 5 things I'd really like to do in this game, or factions, elements of the world I want to include, parts of the player stories I want to include, a monster that I've just been dying to use for a while, whatever it is, just keep a little tab going of a couple of those things. And then when you have that inkling of like, I kind of want to go off the rails a little bit of this session and I'm going to throw something a little spicy in there, rather than like completely going out of nowhere and being like, you guys find a spaceship and it's like a D&D game. And it's like, suddenly like everything about the world is different. Like there's no going back from that. It's just like, oh, you find a symbol that leads to an interesting faction that I've created, that I already wanted to put into the game. And now here's a reason that I can put them in the game. So that would be my 2 big points of advice. Watch your timing, do it when you'll have more time to think about it, and keep a little list running of things you want to start leaning towards in the game. And that way, when you want to sort of let your creativity run wild, it sort of already has a channel to run down instead of just like splashing all over the place and you have to clean it all up afterwards. And short bonus tip after all that. It's a D&D game, not like a Hollywood blockbuster or like a New York Times best-selling novel. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be completely free of any sort of logical imperfections or plot holes. Sometimes you write a check and it bounces. And so what? Like, there's no overdraft fees in D&D. You don't have to like. I've done this. Like, this is not me like abstracting out. Like, this is something I've done. Hey guys, I sort of put this thing in the game. I don't know where that's going. We're just going to drop it. Just like pretend like that's not in your brain anymore. And we'll just move on. And most people will just be like, okay. So listen to all this advice, use it, and try to improve your craft as a GM or however you're going to be using all this information. But know that it's not the end of the world if you throw out something wild and it doesn't quite land or pan out the way that you were hoping to. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, to your exact question, how do I write creative checks that won't bounce? I feel like the shortest answer I can give is planning. Right? But it's a little bit against the spirit of the concept. But I think that's the important thing. I think, in my opinion, separating the writing of the check and I don't know, potentially the dopamine hit that comes with that, right? From the cashing of the check, where it's like, if you think about it, what you're really saying you want is, I want to foreshadow stuff for my players. Now, sometimes that's saying, hey guys, somebody's going to vomit in the last scene and like everybody's waiting for it. Like, it just couldn't be more clear, right? But sometimes it's just there's something that comes up, like make them work for it, I guess would be what the point is. Don't say it out loud, but give them all the clues they need to figure it out. So when it happens, it feels almost better that they've put it together. It's beginning to sound like my tip is don't write checks, sneak up on them. But I wanted to give an example because the idea is, Tim said, keep it simple, right? And I think that's the most important thing. Before you know what it is, don't hype it too much, but you can write the check, right? Michael Scott does that in The Office. He promises everybody this big surprise, and then he doesn't know what to do. And he goes out and he brings back ice cream sandwiches for everybody. If he had done this on a normal day, everybody would have been so happy. But because he did it on the day, somebody first got, they immediately call him out and go, well, is that the surprise? And he's like, no, of course not. You're now painted into a corner, right? So I don't know, like write checks, but like a magician, maybe use the illusion of choice to make it seem like there's only one possible thing that could happen. And then when your players tell you what that is, make it that, because then you'll write all the best checks and the players will basically be covering them for you. You're I don't know, embezzling money now in this analogy. But yeah, so I think Jeff and Tim had some really good tips, but hopefully saying not to do it is a pretty good tip for me.
That's it. That's got to be your blanket advice now. Just say that. Be like, nah, I wouldn't.
To distance myself enough, I'm like, well, how? Let me put it this way. That's how I would do it, because I am not the type of person that writes checks that they can't cash. Maybe that means that I don't do the very creative, off the cuff things that you mentioned. That's true, right? You lose something, but no, that doesn't change the way.
Yeah, he's like, no, I'm a very fiscally responsible game master.
Yeah, Tim's here for the.
You solve every problem of Dungeons and Dragons by just not playing. Problem solved.
Or playing it right, Jeff. Okay, that's what's at stake. No,
that's amazing. Well, if you liked this answer and you want to ask us a question, as I said, we do have a Patreon, and that's one of the tiers. It's called Terror Speaker. Hopefully this advice was good, no matter if you're a patron or not. And in the comments below, tell us your story about that check, whether you're the person that threw it out there, the person that was a player and it went either well or really poorly and you were disappointed. Would love to hear that story. And we're Tabletop Terrors. We really love creativity, tabletop games, and just having fun. So if you love those things too, then welcome to the channel. Consider subscribing, and if you hit the notification bell, it'll alert you whenever we put up videos just like this. We'll end with a Tabtarian toast.
May you mend the first break.
May you kill the first snake.
May you conquer everything you undertake.
Sláinte. Another check, actually, in a TV show, or probably one of the biggest ones that I can think of that isn't lost, is in the show Bones. The Gravedigger storyline does not, in my opinion, end very satisfyingly. It was a bunch of stuff they set up, and then they kind of like hand waved it a little bit, and then that was it. And that was too bad.
Yeah.
So it's like it even happens in real life in real TV shows.
Yeah, it does. I'll do a very quick one for a show, Blacklist. They build up this villain in one of the seasons, and like literally the first episode of the next season, they make him a buffoon who gets arrested or something like that. And I was like,
yeah,
what? Anyway, it happens.
Yeah.